The head of the UN's nuclear watchdog says he's extremely concerned about reported communication difficulties between the Ukrainian regulator and nuclear sites under Russian control. Rafael Grossi said the Ukrainian authorities were having trouble contacting staff at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, the biggest in Europe. A relative of someone who works inside the Chernobyl nuclear plant has spoken to the BBC. Now, you'll know that facility was taken over by Russian forces over a week ago. We have called her Valerie. It's not her real name, but we want to protect her identity, and she described the situation there.
The conditions are kind of concerning right now. They're fed only once a day. It's like very simple and poor food. They can't sleep normally because, first of all, they have to work basically 24/7 because they have to keep maintaining the plant working properly. Almost all their moves are controlled. I mean, they're not interrupted if they're working, but they can't move freely. They just always have to be convoyed by the Russian army.
I've been speaking to Laura Rockwood. She's a director at Open Nuclear Network, an advisory group which seeks to reduce the risk that nuclear weapons are used in error, particularly in an escalating conflict. And she gave me her reaction to these latest developments.
It's very troubling. And the most troubling part of it is that apparently the staff at the reactor facilities are now subject to seeking prior approval from the Russian commander at the location before they can take any action. What's troubling is we have no idea what kind of nuclear expertise this commander has. And if something should happen that requires immediate handling by the staff and they're required to go through the Russian commander, it could get very complicated.
When you say that, Laura, what is your concern? I mean, what could happen potentially?
Well, you could have something happening. Perhaps a projectile damages the reactor system, and the operator needs to take measures that are necessary to control that damage. If they delay that kind of action, they could, in effect, be prevented from taking measures that would prevent a meltdown.
I mentioned that the Zaporizhzhia plant, Laura, is the biggest in Europe. Can you give us a bit more of an idea of how big it is and exactly what happens there? How many staff would be working on site usually?
Don't know the number of staff, but you're talking a very, very large facility. It involves 6 separate nuclear reactors. It also has a spent fuel pond. That's in effect, a swimming pool where they store used nuclear fuel. And they also have a separate storage where they put used fuel that they consider dry storage. So what you want to make sure is whether the material in the reactor or in these storage areas are fully cooled by water. And to do that, you need electricity from the external power grid. So very, very large facility. Indeed, Ukraine's nuclear power is 54% of its electrical grid. So if the electricity were to go out, let alone whether there were a catastrophe, this could be very bad for the people of Ukraine.
Is there any chance of getting IAEA inspectors or people in there to see what's going on?
That remains to be seen. Rafael Grossi has offered to convene a discussion between the Russians and the Ukrainians with a view to developing a framework to prevent some of these activities threatening the nuclear power plants. Thus far, there hasn't been an agreement to do that. I think the Russian response initially was that this might be useful. So we'll have to wait and see. I would expect some sort of decision being taken in the next couple of days. Clearly, it is for Ukraine to control its own nuclear facilities, but if it's being impeded to do so by the Russians, then clearly the Russians would have to be engaged in that discussion as well.
Laura, there is so much concern over the nuclear issue, not just what is happening at the power plants, but nuclear weapons as well, the fact that President Putin has raised the threat. Do you know if Western agencies in any way have noticed any changes, anything that people should be worried about?
I'm not aware of any, but the thing to remember is that both the US and the Russian Federation have nuclear weapons that are pretty much ready to go fairly quickly anyway. So you might not detect any significant movement, any change in the location or the readiness of the nuclear weapons, even if you were looking for it.